Oh yeah.
Welcome to the Geekscape Book Club. I am very excited to be here talking about Aquaman, not just any Aquaman, the Aquaman 1986 miniseries that looks an awful lot like this that you're seeing. If you're watching us on YouTube, it'll be part of the thumbnail for our audio audience. In any case, as always, I am Christian Bladt. On the far side of your screen is the one and only Mr. Eric Connor. Hello, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Always a pleasure to swim alongside you. And let's go Mets. Welcome to opening day.
That's why we're dressed the way we are. Opening day was rained out, so we figured let's just get really damp and spend some time below the ocean with my personal orm, Mr. Eric Connor. And making a triumphant return to the show is our friend Jeff Winstead. I almost said your name wrong. Jeff Winstead of The Alternate. And I usually, when I'm talking to you, I have your book right here. And I know that I moved it to my big office because I thought I was going to start doing it. The show there, perfect. Keep holding it up. Keep holding it up. We want everyone to see The Last Battle of the Revolution by Jeff Winstead, and wherever books are found, but mostly Amazon.
Pretty much,
it seems like the best way to get it. So we are very excited to have you with us again, Jeff, because you are a creative in the industry, and we're just kind of geeky fanboys. But this story in particular was one I wanted to talk to you about because you were the first person that I ever knew who would really sing the praises of this specific Aquaman miniseries, this 1986 post-crisis miniseries. And we'll talk a little bit about, Eric and I reading it for the first time. But tell me what it was about this, why it stood out. Obviously, no shortage of Aquaman stories before that and plenty after. But why this Aquaman series by Neil Ponzer and Craig Hamilton?
Well, it really just coincides with me getting into comics. So starting to read comics for the first time, this was what was on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, so you grow up watching Super Friends, and you're in a comic book shop and you see a spinner rack and there's this with this costume. And so I was just sort of fascinated by the rebranding essentially, and picked it up for that reason. Ironically, I picked up issue 2. Until years later, I'd only read issues 2 and 4.
Oh, wow.
For the younger members of the viewing audience, back in the old days, if you went to a regular grocery store or 7-Eleven to pick up your comics, you couldn't always guarantee the next issue would be there the next week. Or if you were traveling, different stores carry different books. It was years later in the back issue bins where I got issues 1 and 3.
Well, similarly for me, I didn't miss any along the way. But for Secret Wars, I was issues 4 through 12. 1, 2, 3, I missed them, and that was it. I didn't get them for a very long time, So it's and there were gaps in my, I was a avid collector of Uncanny X-Men, and there's just issues that you just missed for whatever reason. You didn't get to the store on the right day. You had to choose one book over the other because you're like, I've only got 60 cents and there's 3 books that are 60 cents each. Which one do I pick? And for me, it was probably usually Spider-Man. So you really only knew the character from like Super Friends.
Super Friends and Underoos.
Right.
The branding was pretty much that. And
were you wearing those while buying the books?
I may have been about 5 years too old by that point. So
yeah, no. I'm pretty sure that that was. I'm pretty sure that was the title of Burt Ward's autobiography. By the way, Super Friends and Underoos. I'm almost positive. Yeah, it absolutely should have been. But yeah, so and it's a very different version of the character if you know him from the Super Friends. Now, interestingly, our mutual friend Will Sterling, who was kind enough to lend me these issues of Aquaman, these are his personal issues. He recommended to me a couple years ago. I guess Rebirth is what happened after New 52. Yes. And that was a run of Aquaman that he really liked. So I read that a little while ago, and I was definitely interested in it. And I'm like, okay, the character isn't the character doesn't just do to Fish what Peacemaker says he does to Fish. You know, there's a little bit, there's more to him. I found it very interesting because by that point I'd seen the first Aquaman movie. And so I think having read that, I'm a little bit more prepared for this. This does not read, I did not read hardly any DC superhero comics. I read Star Trek and I read V, based on the miniseries, you know, with the lizard people.
Yeah.
Those were the DC comics I read. And my brother occasionally bought Firestorm, and I'd read that. And, you know, I kind of liked the suit, but I didn't really get what was going on. If I had read this in 1986, I can't lower my head enough right now to show you how far over my head it all would have felt, you know, because it's basically, this is literally, spoiler for the end of this series, this is a kinder, gentler Aquaman. This is the Alan Alda of Aquaman. This is the I'm in touch with my feelings Aquaman. And it makes him more powerful, which I was just like, wow, that's not a, maybe that is a very 1986 message. Maybe I'm missing that part of it. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't know. That really resonated with me as a kid. Of course, I'm a 12-year-old at that point.
Yeah.
And
you couldn't bottle up your rage, and you wanted to learn how. Yeah.
Right. And, no, I was really fascinated with that aspect of the story. Again, we're sort of jumping ahead to the fourth issue.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing about these books, the way they were written, is this the first time that you guys have done a book that hadn't been collected as a trade for the club?
Yes, actually it is. Yeah, there's times where it's just easier to read them. Okay, so we did Days of Future Past. We did God Loves Man Kills. I had that. That was easy. Right. But usually it's available as a trade paperback. I think when we did Echo, I read the individual issues, but I read it digitally. Sure. So that it was collected. And as Eric and I found out, it was actually, they collected the issues in a slightly different order. It made sense for that explanation. But yeah, Eric, you've been on almost every one of these. I don't think we've ever done a story where it wasn't available as a trade paperback.
This was the first time I had to actually click 4 separate times to get it.
Did you make 4 separate purchases on Comixology or somewhere similar?
I did, although Comixology, the app, is no longer a thing on my iPad. So that was a humbling, sobering moment as well. But yes, it's straight up just 4 issues of Aquaman that we looked at, which it is funny because it was kind of a different sort of experience because of that. Like, it definitely it did feel more like I was literally reading 4 issues as opposed to a collection, although the story is so intertwined that I can't imagine if I read issue 3, I'd be kind of lost. So I am surprised they never actually did a collection of this storyline.
Yeah. And I was talking to Jeff before we started. I think part of that reason is that it doesn't have sort of the marquee talent involved. I'm not diminishing the talent involved. Obviously, we're going to talk about some of the beautiful artwork and things like that. And, you know, just some of the very grown-up storytelling, but, you know, not in like a Alan Moore way, just grown-up as in like more cerebral. And, you know, it doesn't have a George Perez, you know, it doesn't have even Marv Wolfman, you know what I mean? Just picking both guys from the Teen Titans, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's not one of those things like, oh, we got to get this collected. And maybe it's because it's Aquaman as well. Like, if this was a seminal Batman series, it probably would have been, but, what do you think about that, Jeff? About the fact that it's not available as a trade paperback and also has never been. It's not out of print. They never collected it as a trade paperback.
I think because they quickly wrote it out of continuity, frankly.
Right.
Within a couple years, they did a Aquaman special after this where they made some allusion to it, but they put him back in the orange and green costume, sort of swept this under the rug and just moved along from there.
Yeah, this this story of his origin seems far more consistent with the movie origin, whereas within a couple years, I thought I still had the tab open, but I'm not smart enough to have left it open. They did undo it by like 88, and this was 86. You know, so go ahead.
Every single member of the creative team, except for the colorist, is new talent essentially. So, Neil Posner, he was a design director at DC. I think,
and he's also listed as the editor.
he co-editor with
these
Dick
stories.
Giordano.
Right.
And Craig Hamilton, this was his first, he had done some pinups for Marvel Fanfare, but I believe this was his first sequential story work. Steve Montano, the inker, was an apprentice of Dick Giordano as an inker. Bob Lapin, the letterer, was a classmate of Neil Posner's. And Joe Orlando was the only real veteran who had been around since the EC days, doing horror comics for Warren and Harris. And so he sort of grounded it, with the colors, which are very unusual in the series.
Yeah. The interesting thing, and I also mentioned this to Jeff before we started, that I thought that some of the cover work, or even this is an advertisement that I'm zoomed in on for our video audience. It had a Barry Windsor Smith quality, and I thought that perhaps it was him, but you pointed out it's P. Craig Russell who did a lot. I know him mostly as a cover artist, but maybe there's something that he did that I'm not aware of.
Yeah,
Jeff.
so P. Craig Russell, he inked, not this image we're seeing here, but he inked the covers for issues 2 through 4. So they're all drawn by Craig Hamilton, the interior artist. But P. Craig Russell has a little more of a sort of chunky, illustrative style that I think gave it that Barry Windsor Smith sort of Conan feel.
Yeah.
And there is an interesting element to the story, in fact, where it feels like it's a fantasy. It's more of a fantasy setting. Aquaman stories up to this point had been sort of sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first time you're really seeing Aquaman in a fantasy story, but it's not just high fantasy. I mean, that's there because it's magic spell with the K stuff, but there's also sort of the quest, Conan the Barbarian sort of element too, which is fun.
There's the epic quality of collecting the crystals, and there's sort of that's a very Arthur C. Clarke. That's not the author I'm thinking of, but also Tolkien. There's all that sort of feeling of this is a quest of self-discovery. You probably very easily break down which point in each of these 4 issues is what era of the hero's journey. You know what I mean?
Right.
Eric, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts reading this for the first time, and when I told you were reading this, I'm going to suspect this was probably not a series that you even heard much about, correct?
It wasn't. It's funny. I was trying to think about is this the first Aquaman I ever bought? And so I might do a little bit of a deep dive in the deep dive that is my house's very scary back room to see if I could find any old Aquaman. I'm curious myself. And
let's just say that back room has a lot of paintings of clowns. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Eric?
I mean, is there ever too many paintings of clowns? Let's be honest. No,
there's not.
I did find the old Aquaman figure that
nice.
I had bequeathed to my son at some point.
Hold him up again. We want to make sure that everybody gets to see him.
And I think he has. It's not working, but I think this is the one where. Oh wait, you squeeze the arms and the legs are supposed to move. But
they're supposed to kick so he can swim.
Yeah.
I think he had a traumatic injury at some point along the way.
I think that
see the crotch more down.
Jeff's right. Jeff's right. I think that's the superpowers.
Yes, it is.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Good eye.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't have the super punch of Bob the Goon from Batman figures in 1989. One of my other favorites, but
the only reason that line was inferior to the Marvel Secret Wars line is that every character didn't inexplicably come with a shield.
Right.
Captain America came with a shield, but it was exactly the same as Spider-Man's shield. But anyway,
with the little hologrammy thing. Yeah,
I'll let you get back to what you were trying to talk about.
And Secret Wars figure right here. This was actually kind of a unique experience for me. Definitely, I'm glad we looked at this, though, as far as it's the roots of really Aquaman 1 and 2 movies are both tied directly into this. So, although they changed it, they changed the relationship with his brother in a way that actually I found really kind of interesting, that his brother had no sort of fantastical blood in his system, right? He was just human born. And then he, in essence, always had a chip on his shoulder about my brother comes from this sort of magical, fantastical landscape. I want to be more like him. And I actually, I like that turn here because, my knowledge of the brother admittedly comes more from the movies where his dad is his dad
His dad's Boba Fett.
Boba Fett, right. Well, no, that's Arthur's dad, but the
Oh,
brother's
right.
dad is it Dolph Lundgren? No, it's one of the other guys. It's some magical king. Yeah,
No,
some
know. Yeah,
magical
you're
fish
right.
king.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But I think there's,
but yeah, you're right. In the movies, Nicole Kidman's both of their mother.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's the half sibling group, and I think I actually kind of dig this a little bit more. I think this idea of someone who almost like wills himself into having these like powers and abilities, I think makes him as a villain far more interesting. Now, we'll get into the weeds on the writing of it because I thought really some of his dialogue, I was like, wow, this dude's.
Well, there's one in particular that I might start with, which is the last one you sent to me. But
I grabbed some of his questionable insults. I felt like he definitely could use a roast master to help him with some of his one-liners. But
so you think he should have hired funny man Jeff Ross, the roast
Jeff
master
Ross?
general?
Yes, he needed him, but.
Also, I do know someone who wrote the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar roast that he might be able to bring in
and affordable too,
at an affordable rate. Well, look, because it came up, let's just share this moment, and I don't know what issue this is, but this is from issue 4. Yeah. Okay, so this is the beginning of issue 4, and Orm is saying, "Well, Aquamaroon, how's it feel to finally be on the losing side in a head-to-head with the Ocean Master?" All right, that's standard fare. I could see Lex Luthor or Dr. Doom saying that.
Aquamaroon?
Hey, Aquamaroon.
I had so many questions. And
well, wait. You didn't let me get to Arthur's
I'm sorry.
response. Come down here in person, Orm, you coward. I'll show you head-to-head.
Yeah.
That's one of those sometimes at 2 a.m. This is as good as you're gonna put it down on ink. So you're like, all right, I'll move on. Did he mean aqua? And I know it's aquamarine. But was it
no? Because
moron?
I only know this
Bunny fan.
I was gonna say I only know that from Bugs Bunny that's an insult from like the 40s. Eh, what a maroon. Yeah. So he's like, hey, Aquamaroon.
Stay right here. I'll murder you later.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There is something to be said for that, but yeah, look, and I think in some ways, even when we've gone through works by, authors we've highlighted on this show, there will sometimes be those moments, where characters say something. And, God, I remember when I was a kid and, I was reading West Coast Avengers and, I think, I don't know, Mockingbird was attacking the team for some reason. And, Hawkeye's just like, "Is someone controlling you?" And I'm like, it's a little on the nose. Like there's, like, I was just like, it's his wife. I don't know. And 40 years later, I thought of it as I was reaching for a bad line of dialogue. That one came to mind. In general, I would say I found, like I said, the writing to be sophisticated. And if I had picked up issue 2 and missed issue 3, I would have been like, forget it. I don't need issue 4, because that's, I think just at, in my, just my headspace, what was I was 10. I turned 10 that year. This just wasn't going to connect for me. I think, I think a lot of even, the X-Men stuff that I loved, there was enough, action and good characters that I'm going to say, I don't think I got Life Death the first time I read it, so, speaking of Barry Windsor Smith, but, so I was glad to read this. And yeah, Jeff, have you seen the second Aquaman movie now available on Max?
I have not, no.
Okay.
No.
It's all right.
They took some stuff from
There's some stuff from this, yeah. And I actually thought that when they went to sort of the ice area, I thought it was going to be that storyline that they featured in Aquaman 2. But there are elements to it, the sort of the Orm aspect of it, but it's more of a buddy comedy, right, Eric? The second one, it's like. It's like Lethal Weapon underwater, basically. It's like, can you believe how crazy this guy is? But I definitely enjoyed it, but it's it's weird. It's the first time that I've gone back and read something that's, from the era I started collecting comics, and it's creators I'd literally never read anything before. That happens all the time now. I'm just like, I don't know who this artist is. I like this character. Let me check it out. So Jeff, at what point are you able to fill in issues 1 and 3? And does that sort of cement this as like, oh, wow, this isn't just a good story. This is a great story.
It was probably 5 years later. I mean, before I ever discovered a back issue bin, like an actual comic shop that wasn't a 7-Eleven or whatever. So,
right.
And what's so funny is because the way older comics are written, they're not written for trade paperback collections. And so when I read issue 2 and then read issue 4, well, in the first few pages of issue 4, they recap issue 3.
Yeah.
So you really, actually recap the whole series, to be honest. So when I finally read issues 1 and 3, I felt those were the inferior issues of the series.
Oh, interesting.
And reading it this time with an eye toward, what would this be like if I were you guys, reading it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I don't know that if I had picked up issue 1 first, that I would have continued with it.
It is a lot of setup. Yeah.
Setup, it has some clunking transitions, scene transitions. Some of the dialogue is not just hokey like we saw in the previous example, but clunky in places.
No, I agree. Too. And Eric, you sent me some images, and I'll periodically drop them in. But I want to start with this one. I guess this is when Orm is choking Arthur, and there's blood coming out of his mouth. Is that what's happening here in this one?
Yeah, and I liked for a moment, I'm like, oh, cool. It's almost like a Sin City kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, the rest of it doesn't really go with this. But for a moment, I grabbed the screen grab of it, because I was like, oh, cool. And then the rest of it doesn't quite follow this. Though one thing about issue 1, I actually wish they had maybe done a bit more of a recap of what he had just lost, because that kicks in a lot in issue 4. And I think it would have helped, considering like these comics oftentimes would do this. I'm surprised that it didn't kind of lean a little bit more into his mourning, his recent loss. And maybe you could help with this, like context wise. How recent was it? Was the loss of his son, right? Yeah. That preceded this. And I wasn't sure, was that a recent loss? Like, was it a few issues before?
In real time, it was not. So we're talking about 1978, sort of like 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
From a continuity standpoint, this is the first Aquaman series since 1978. So
he was just like in the Justice League as a featured player.
So his original series from the Silver Age ended in 71. They then shunted him over to Adventure Comics, which is an anthology book. Then they brought his original series back with the same numbering in 1976 for a few issues, and they ended it in 78. In the last issue of that, in the issue before that, they killed off his son in Adventure Comics. And then he was once they canceled his book the second time, he was only in Justice League. He had some Action Comics backups. He was maybe doing some backups in World Finest. And just before this, what was happening in continuity was he was the chairman of the Justice League. And when there was an alien invasion and most of the big members, Superman, Green Lantern, were busy doing other stuff and they didn't show up, Aquaman kicked them all out of the Justice League and brought in people who could commit to the team full time. So that's where you get what we call now Justice League Detroit, or the replacement Justice League. It's basically second stringers, Zatanna, Elongated Man, and then what would be generous to call third stringers, which is new characters like Vi.
Right. Oh, wow.
It was like the scrubs from the NFL strike in '87, basically.
Essentially, it was an excuse for Jerry Conway, who was the writer at the time, to bring in all characters he had created.
Right. Well, there's always something to be said for that. And there's a proud history, sometimes proud, for both of the big two, that characters whose, solo books don't really pan out, they end up, in a team book. The biggest example for me is the Carol Danvers Ms. Marvel joins the Avengers, and she did so little that I think that the writer at that point, who I think was David Michelini, forgot she was there, so she didn't have any dialogue in one of the issues, but she was in fight scene, and it was almost like, oh right, yeah, Carol's on the team now. And I talked about West Coast Avengers. That there's like an era that has like Moon Knight, the Julia Carpenter Spider-Woman, and it's a lot of like, well, these characters that didn't work on their own, but they're good characters. Let's actually put them on a team. And it's so interesting, Jeff, because until you said that, I had no idea that Aquaman hadn't had a book since 1978, because to me, he's like, he's like the Justice League. He was in the Super Friends. He ends up in the DCEU movies. So the idea that there was this long stretch where people were like, yeah, we're kind of over Aquaman. It kind of makes sense the way people talk about the character. But he really is so much more than just that guy that talks to fish,
Right. And this was a time period where DC was actually really struggling with their like big second tier characters. So Green Lantern sales were down. Even Wonder Woman was basically being printed at a loss.
How soon around this period do we get the John Stewart is the replacement Green Lantern, right? Does that happen around here?
So John Stewart was Green Lantern as this was coming out. So this was coming out as Crisis on Infinite Earths is ending.
Right.
And so they brought Hal Jordan back just a few months after this, but the way they sort of tried to save the series was they made it a team book. So they renamed it Green Lantern Corps.
Oh, right.
6 Green Lanterns on Earth.
Yeah, inside one of these issues, because I'm reading the dusty newsprint version, there's an ad for Green Lantern 200. So that tells me kind of exactly. That kind of makes sense. And look, and I think that it is an interesting time in comics, because it is the same time that Marvel has Tony Stark's a drunk and he's not Iron Man, so Rhodey's Iron Man. You have the Spider-Man black suit. She-Hulk is on the Fantastic Four. So it was definitely a lot of like, let's see what we can do to kind of mix things up a little bit. And Jeff, it's interesting you mentioned Crisis, because that is the inspiration for this show, that I had never read Crisis. So you sent me a trade paperback of it, and then I sent you a trade paperback of Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, one of my favorite miniseries, and one that we've still never done on this show, but we'll get to it. I think I've already done my one Claremont chat for the year, so maybe next year we'll talk to him about Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. I don't want to make his wife angry. If you saw that episode of Marvel Movie Talk, our audience, I had promised his wife that I would keep it to 90 minutes, and it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I lied to his wife, as I have many times before, about being able to follow the clock. But the reason I go through all that, remind me of what Aquaman's role is in Crisis, and as Crisis ends, where we're at with the character.
So he has very little role.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
He shows up a couple times with the Justice League, which he's still a member of at that point. He had actually just left the group when the series started. So that's where we're picking up. And it is confusing, as Eric said. They don't really recap all of that clearly in the first issue. So he and Mira, or his wife, were having problems, largely because of the death of the son, as you can imagine.
Right. And her lawsuit with Johnny Depp. That was the other reason.
Never helps. And you can see how that would cause issues. And so he leaves to have a reconciliation with Mira, and that's where we're picking up this story.
Okay.
But, at one point in issue 1, there's actually a pretty good line, if you know of that continuity, where he's giving up his old costume and putting on the new one. And Vokal, the king of Atlantis, says to him, "Is there anything you need from this old costume?" And he says, "Well, this is my Justice League signal device, but I won't need them down here."
Yeah.
And it sort of has a 2-part meaning if you understand what was happening at the time, which was Aquaman basically is a loner. He wants to go it alone. But also, he doesn't think these second-tier chumps are going to be able to help him. So it's really a diss on his own team. You don't know that he would have said that if it was Green Lantern and Superman.
Right.
And to your point, that comes back to bite him on the gills a little bit later when he basically he's like, I wish I had that right now because I need the help.
I guess Zantana's a character that could have helped him deal with magical threat, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, it's like, look, if I had the bat signal down here, I'd shine it. But I've basically got Squirrel Girl's beeper. That's not going to help me at all, And I know that's not this universe, but I don't know who's the DC equivalent of Squirrel Girl. I don't know that there is one.
Gleek.
Definitely
from Super Friends. Who's
Yes.
Vibe?
Vibe is a Jerry Conway created character for the Justice League, and he's a Hispanic breakdancing character who has.
Oh boy!
You mean he's now my favorite DC character ever?
Yeah, I love this character, but yes, and so he has vibration powers. Don't make any jokes, and yeah, that's his whole shtick. And so yeah, he was one of the members at the time created just for the series.
So he was created for Justice League.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah. Imagine you want to replace the main Justice League members with other characters, but you don't even use existing DC characters. Half the team is made up of characters that Jerry Conway makes up for the series. So you can understand why I didn't really do that great.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were going to talk about Vibe today, but here he is, and
that's his good costume, by the way.
Oh, I was about to say it. I was about to say it reminds me of Wonder Man's Christmas tree costume, the red and green one that he had. Yeah. The costume that was so bad that when he had a one shot, they actually had him in like his trench coat costume on the cover because like we're not going to sell any if he's wearing that. So this is Vibe, huh? This gentleman here, you always want to show off the footwear whenever you can.
You see just a couple of shots of him in the Aquaman book we just read, but he's not wearing this exact suit, but he has his sunglasses when they show montage shots of the Justice
So he was part of the Justice League Detroit and became the first member to be killed in action. All right. I guess that's one way to do it.
Claim to fame,
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Justice League Electric Boogaloo at last.
Yeah. So I see that's the thing. Like I can understand getting a couple extra characters in a team book, but it's like, I don't know, at least while I was reading it, the Avengers always had Captain America. The Fantastic Four always had 3 of the 4 of them, It's like, you're not going to just put in like all the also ran characters, I mean, the New Mutants was usually the core New Mutants. X-Men, one time it turned into a bunch of tough as nails broads and Wolverine, and it was like, oh, it still worked somehow. I don't know, but
X-Men can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're the best-selling comic book, in the industry. So, all right. So, I thought that this sort of way of dealing with him was interesting, and this blue costume doesn't last for very long in real continuity or like real world continuity, right? It's like 2 years and then it's out.
Yeah, the special that comes out in '88. I don't want to get into the details. There's sort of a storyline with an astral projection of Aquaman, and the astral projection is wearing this outfit. But that's it, and it's gone after this. They make a couple allusions to it over the years just for nostalgia's sake, but you can kind of understand. Back to my point, when you're selling underoos and lunch boxes, and because Superpowers was still on the air, I believe in '86, it may have been called something different, but you can't take a character, even a second tier character like this, and replace his outfit that easily.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's the thing with the Spider-Man black suit. I mean, the whole plan was that he got rid of it after 6 months. Like by the time it shows up in Secret Wars, he's already realized it's a symbiote, and Reed Richards has had to take it off of him. But then they sort of go back and forth. He's got like, well, I've got the black suit that isn't the alien black suit. It's just the regular one, and I wear it sometimes, like at night, But that's an interesting thing to think about, sort of the branding of it, that, there have been different looks to Batman and Superman. And for the most part, though, they usually look the way we think of them, I guess the most drastic would be there's like the biker chick version of Wonder Woman at one point, right, Jeff?
Yeah, late '90s.
Yeah, which late '90s was crazy time. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, no, I was saying though, but it makes sense though. If it's like, again, you're trying to rebrand, and by the way, it's really interesting. I feel like I'm learning so much more now that I almost wish I knew this before I even read this. But the truth is, it wasn't in the comic book, so it's on them to not have that. But it's like you do a rebrand. Like it's like, okay, we're bringing Aquaman back. It's been a minute. apparently orange only works for Mets fans like Christian and I. So why?
Well, the San Francisco Giants, but yeah.
And I never heard of them.
Okay.
So I think it's a smart move. And actually, I kind of dug the blue costume, although it also gave one of my most unintentionally hilarious moments in this. Favorite and unintentionally hilarious moment was when they go, "Oh, well, who's that blonde hair guy?" I have no idea. And so, in essence, it's not even Superman where it's like, "Oh, so my glasses come off. You have no idea it's me." It's the idea like you don't even change from the neck up. You just change what he's wearing, and suddenly no one recognizes him.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Some blonde guy. Never saw him before.
So well, I'm just going to explain for our audio audience. The YouTube audience can see right now this panel where it's like, whoa, who was that? Some blonde guy. Never saw him before. I hope it wasn't someone with another shipment from the surface world. So it's like, yeah, I hope this isn't the FedEx guy underwater.
You mean Blondie McBlonde? Yeah, no, it's not him.
Yeah. Oh, is it Michael Pere with a bleach job? What were you going to say, Jeff?
I was going to say, so to this, the second issue of the print edition has letters from longtime readers who were sent black and white photostat copies to preview. And one reader says, "Hey, I don't think this costume actually works very well as a disguise because he literally looks like Aquaman, so he doesn't have a mask."
Oh, I was wondering how they had letters, because that was one of the things I was going to mention, like reading these glorious 4 issues. One of them has a 2-page letters page. And now it makes sense that both issues that have actual letters are only about issue 1, because they sent the black and whites, which I'm now remembering. Somehow I got that once for something, and I could, but I can't remember what it was. It was like, I can't remember. It was a much smaller publisher, and I forget how I even was able to see, because I remember reading something like that. And by the way, to our point earlier about Arthur Curry, delivery man to the gods, Cami Egan chimes in. It's the C version of Amazon. Yes, exactly. So we appreciate that. It is interesting. I do like the suit because it's different. It's not like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's blue. I think that's probably good for under the water. But it's really fairly obscure suit. When you were first talking to me about this, I thought, the very first time we brought this miniseries, I thought that this was the Aquaman that, for our visual audience, looks like the guy from the old New York Islanders logo, like with the beard, but he also had like a hook hand. Like, I thought that this was the hook hand story. So where does that come in to the character's evolution?
So that comes in the early 90s, and that was written by Peter David, who always took great offense when people called it a hook hand, because it's actually a harpoon hand.
You know what? I would hate to upset Peter David, who wrote many great issues of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. So I sit here corrected that it is a harpoon hand, and I should have known better. My apologies.
But that is the thing with Aquaman. Like, over the last 30, 40 years, he has changed. There have been so many different interpretations, both in print, in media, cartoons and movies, that it's really hard to kind of get a grip on the character. They've kind of gone back to, and they've changed the origin, as Eric was saying before. And I agree, Eric, that this version of Ocean Master, where he is jealous of his brother's powers, is a much more powerful origin than what they later changed it to, which they used in the movies, where he was actually his sort of brother from Atlantis. He's just a normal human who had driven so much by his hatred that he had the drive to make himself a match for his brother. It's pretty impressive, actually.
The fact that he's able to accomplish it, I think that dynamic is a lot more interesting. So I think we've touched on the reasons why it hasn't been collected, because you're right that it's like a reset on the character where they almost immediately are like, nah, just kidding, we're going to reset it again. So it stepped almost immediately out of canon, which is interesting because this comes out right after Crisis, when Crisis was supposed to fix all those things, all the inconsistencies for 50 years that didn't seem to make sense.
This was DC's big problem, is all the Crisis reboots and rebrandings rolled out over a period of a couple of years, and they often stepped over each other. Hawkman's even got worse treatment than Aquaman here.
At least they learned from that, and they never did anything like that again. Where say maybe they took 52 titles and did something new with them.
Right. Everyone ate it. Yes.
And look, by the way, Marvel's Heroes Reborn is also something that I was not collecting comic books at that time, and I caught wind of it, and I'm like, oh, that's why I don't. So they both, they were definitely fighting for air, as the great Jacques Cousteau would say. There's some other images that Eric sent me that I wanted to focus on. So there's talk about this squid-like image of why this is the Royal Laboratory, which is a much funner way to say laboratory.
It's one of those. It's like, okay, part of like having the unique world being underwater. It's like, why do you kind of lean into it being an underwater world instead of saying, oh, we're just going to have a lab, something that looks like a lab, but it's underwater. It feels like it's kind of a missed opportunity design wise.
So you think it should be made out of seashells and at least cave walls or something?
I that would be my guess. I mean, unless and it made me wonder so much, did they literally like steal this from someplace above ground and then just sort of swam down with it at some point? And it's one of those, like, you almost feel like, okay, well, yeah, Batman has a lab, and let's give Aquaman some kind of lab too. And it's one of those moments where it just, one of the things, if you're doing Aquaman, like, do Aquaman. It's okay. Like, yes, the things should not look like they do in other comics. And that's in some ways like kind of ride or die with him as a character, and ride or die with the world of Atlantis and the underwater world that we live in. And so, that was just one of those many moments along the way where I'm like, why do they have that? And by the way,
there's Egan suggests reinforced seaweed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think the Gilligan's Island of it all. You just take what the sea gives you. But we do have the image handy, Christian, of when the people were protesting against Aquaman.
You mean this one that I was about to get to? Yes.
This is this moment I did cackle loudly.
This is like the Mutant Menace recreation. There are many X-Men comics that have scenes like this, and I do love the Arthur Curry like effigy that's here. Just sort of hanging up here.
No, please correct me if I'm wrong. Are these supposed to be underwater people doing this, or is this above ground?
No, this is, I think, his own people.
Okay,
so they have signs underwater. You know what? Until you said that, I was about to answer like, well, this has to be above ground, but no. I guess it's not.
And that's why I grabbed this one, because also in part of what makes hanging working is gravity, and so if you hang someone underwater, it's really against the purpose of hanging. Not to tell these guys how to live their lives, but I saw this more. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're hanging someone underwater? Like, that's just not going to do it. So
I think most of these images are from issue 1, right?
Yes, this one. Yeah,
you're correct. We because you basically sent these to me sequentially.
I did. Yeah.
Issue 1 also has a scene of the king of Atlantis sleeping under a blanket. So what's the point of this now? He's not keeping him warm for sure. And
it's very weighted, though.
Very wet.
Well,
very weighted. Yeah.
They always say about that king that he's a little bit of a wet blanket. We'll be right back right after this.
Ring the bell, Christian. Ring the bell.
I don't have it here.
I
really thought I brought it upstairs, but no, it's not.
I know. I came here for the bell.
I know.
To this point, though, I think to say something positive about this stuff, by the time you get to issue 4, you're very much aware that it's happening underwater.
And it's the same
illustration style gets much more rich and much more specific to the character.
Was it different artists on 4 versus 1?
It's not
same artist, but I think this is his first work. He was learning along the way. And
he had never seen water, Eric. Okay, he didn't know how it worked. I think that might have been.
He grew up in Arizona, I guess.
One of the things that you sent was this moment before, when he's being given the blue suit. What stood out about this here was the presentation of the blue suit, Eric.
It was the line here: "Go change behind the throne." And they didn't show that panel, unfortunately, because I think that would have been worthy of a T-shirt. Him with his unmentionables, hanging over a watery throne would have been perfect. But yeah, I think, and definitely there's a real arc in the artistry of this series.
This is what Jeff was talking about. We see he's under a blanket here. He's getting a good night's sleep underneath the blanket. And finish your thought, Eric. I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Oh no, I'm glad you did. It is one though. I think issue 4 was great because it became so much more sort of rooted in psychology. It became much more of an emotional battle of Arthur against Arthur.
Yeah.
And I think like that's really, I think like it's almost like a sliding scale. Like as this thing went on, it just got richer and deeper. And that last issue was one that felt like it's almost like they found their footing on that one. And that's, I wish, to your point, like it was almost, was it, you said issue 2 and 4 versus issues 1 and 3. It has that, I guess, the Star Trek even number curse, where in essence, like that's where they really kind of got their arms around what this story is about. Because I actually think the hero's journey, the emotional arc of a character who's just been left behind by everything, like that moment of him realizing it's like, why has everyone left me?
Well,
or,
I think I was left with the feeling that what would have been great is issue 5. Like I felt like, oh, they kind of stuck the landing. They put this character in a situation, and my understanding is that there was planned for not a continuation of this series, but a follow-up mini-series. And then I guess there were some creative issues. This was just Wikipedia, so it did not give specifics on there. But yeah, I feel like they could have really done some interesting things with this. And does he go back to being just as angry as ever after this, Jeff? And
it takes a while, but yeah, by the early 90s, well, for sure by the early 90s.
Wow, especially, I mean, look, when he's got a harpoon hand, he deserves to be angry.
Yeah, so obviously, when your hand gets eaten off by freshwater piranha or whatever it was, I can't quite remember, but something like that.
By the way, I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
So here's another Eric Connor special, which I guess he's receiving a pummeling from his half brother Orm. You want to talk about this, Eric?
Honestly, I wish it was deeper than this, but the word choices. It's something I'm always fascinated by in comic books, is like, how do you get across the sounds of action or pain? So Ayaraga.
Yeah.
Right, it sounds okay. Now I hear it. Okay, thank you.
There was once a movie on Mystery Science Theater 3000 that was called EGAH exclamation point. So sometimes that's the only way that you're able to make the point you wanted to say. And we're basically we've got in this image that I'm sharing with our visual audience now, we've got Arthur kind of strung up and some very in shape Adam Warlock looking people. What's the fascination with this? Except, of course, for the obvious, that dude's abs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the beefcake element as much as the next man. I won't lie. But if you zoom in on the what he says here, I don't know if you can.
With what Arthur says here.
Yeah. Because that's actually.
First women with metal arms. Next, people walking through walls. Then female kings. What kind of place is this? Yeah. That's it is a moment in time, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't take Arthur for that kind of guy, especially considering how how many powerful women are in Atlantis.
He's friends with Wonder Woman. That's enough. Like, her, she's a lady king. Next thing you know, kings are gonna start wearing skirts around here. You maroon.
What are they going to do next? Vote?
What were you going to say, Jeff?
The coloring. I'm always so sad when I see digital versions of comics.
That's actually a great point.
The coloring on that page, like I don't know if you can see it, I have the print version of the same
thing.
Thing.
Sure, hang on, let me put you up over here. Well, that's not the right
frame. No one wants that.
no one wanted that. Let's put you up there. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wait, hang on to that. Hang on to that. And we'll see if I'm smart enough to put you in the big square.
Oh gosh.
And then look at that. Okay, now put them side by side.
The skin tone is so different.
That's actually, I didn't recognize that image because I read the comic book version, which wow, that's really different.
When you're reading, I find newer comics read digitally, I mean, you're almost reading the native format to read them digitally because they're all colored by computers anyway. And so you don't actually lose anything. In fact, in some cases, you gain by reading the digital versions. But old comics, I'm speaking of West Coast Avengers, I'm rereading that now, Christian, digitally.
Are you reading the John Byrne era, or
no? I'm reading like literally I just finished the original miniseries.
Oh yeah.
I'm like into issue 6 of.
Is that Steve Englehart and Al Milgrom, our friend Al Milgrom?
Yeah, so the original series is by Roger Stern and Bob Hall, and the miniseries.
But then the ongoing,
Englehart and Milgrom, inked by various inkers,
and we are both pro Roger Stern, who created the character of Hobgoblin, had a whole story figured out, and they were like, "Nah, it's Ned Leeds," and he's like, "It's actually not."
But reading that digitally, you really lose something. I didn't lose anything necessarily, but it just looks so gaudy compared to the way because these colorists knew that they were coloring for newsprint. They knew how to use
and you literally had
64 colors anyway.
Right, you had only so many colors to work with, is what I was going to say. So Eric, why did we get this image from? Is this from Suicide Squad?
Yes, it is. The queen or king was giving me so many Enchantress vibes for some reason.
Sure.
And then I looked at the design of Enchantress in the comic book, and it's actually, and I apologize, I meant to send you that image too from the original comic.
Which I don't think you did, though, right?
No, I did not. No, I realized I was looking at my email to you. But yeah, no, I thought like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like all these years later, that design is one that still kind of like would float around in the DC world. Although Enchantress in Suicide Squad, the movie, if you haven't seen it, you'll live a long, healthy life without seeing it.
You're right.
She had some nice dance breaks. This is once again we're seeing the very bright coloring of the digital version.
I'm stunned at how different it is from the print version, by the way. And I know, again, it's a combination too of like these older titles when they just
to Jeff's
sort of
point,
put it in
like
there.
when we read those Daredevil Marvel Knights issues of Echo's introduction, they were like beautiful on digital rendering that I'm sure that wasn't able to, because you read a hardcover. I mean, you read a trade paperback of that, but I read it digitally, and I'm sure that the one thing is with modern comics is that they're not printed on newsprint. They use this like glossy paper now, not the basically the browning newsprint that personally I love when I get to enjoy it, and that was what I had mentioned to Jeff about how it was fun to actually read these as comics. This I really thought that this sort of this origin, this kind of telling of everything for Aquaman, I did find it to be pretty interesting, and it wasn't until after I read it that I realized, this doesn't last for very long, so the legacy of this book is kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. It's not really collected, it's not really referred to, because it's almost like at the end of the miniseries, Sue Ellen wakes up and Patrick Duffy steps out of the shower to let you know that this entire series had actually just been a dream. It's a very cutting edge modern reference for the TikTok generation. They know what I'm talking about. But it really is just like it seems like they kind of gave a big nah, we're not doing that. Which is unfortunate, because I would have. So the special that comes out a couple years later is already kind of moving away from this, Jeff.
Yeah, different writers, different artists, and then Aquaman has a couple of miniseries actually between that and the Peter David ongoing series. Peter David does eventually bring Nuada, the Thierna Na Oj.
I was gonna. That was actually my next question: is if those characters endure at all, or are they forgotten to this? Yeah,
it's almost like a reintroduction. Like they're brought back as if Aquaman's meeting them for the first time, which is kind of was disappointing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something even I think Nuada, the lady with the silver arm, says to Aquaman at one point, she has some sort of like a sense memory of them having a connection, but she can't really recall it. So there's an illusion made that maybe this actually sort of happened, but Crisis wiped it out, sort of situation.
Right. So it's basically
that,
it's like in the opening of the A-Team when Dirk Benedict's standing there and a Cylon warrior walks by him and he looks for a second and he just goes, nah. It's basically that. Is that what you're trying to say, Jeff?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Right.
Or how MCU movies oftentimes deal with the TV shows. Is this about New Jersey? Oh, no, it's not about that.
No.
And so in essence, with one line, a fair amount of WandaVision is gone.
There's two things we don't talk about in the MCU, New Jersey and Bruno. What was it about this sequence that spoke to you, Eric?
Once again, I'm almost embarrassed to admit it. I found the hand thing was curious because it was definitely a callback. It felt like to a Vulcan salute, which is in itself actually a reference to something from Jewish theology. This is something you do as part of a blessing, which is where Leonard Nimoy initially, and I could do it with both hands, by the way, where Leonard Nimoy originally got the idea. So when I saw that, and I was like, "Was that just their fingers are fused together?" I'm like, "No, those are individual fingers."
Were they trying to make like puppy shadow puppets? You know, like something like that.
And then the next one, by the way, a weird hand thing with it's a little bit Nazi-ish. But I understand what they're saying. Oh, sorry. Don't forget Secret Invasion.
And I was just going to make the point, Cam Egan, we're working very hard to forget Secret Invasion. But thank you for that. So there, I mean, look, I think that that's usually a way to convey sort of, this unyielding devotion to a figurehead. It's always sort of some variations on that. It is very effective imagery, and they do go to the well a couple of times in this story. As we start to kind of wind down talking about this, I just really felt like it like I said at the outset, I don't know how well this would have spoken to me as a 10-year-old, but I did find it to be a very interesting and, mature Aquaman story. And, I did enjoy the sort of the rebirth storyline where, he's sort of dealing as more of like an ambassador and an emissary sort of. But it does seem like the being torn between the surface world and Atlantis is really the basis of the character, at least based on the two movies and these now two series that I've read. Do you feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity, Jeff, that they could have done so much more with Aquaman if they'd kind of stuck with this mindset and this presentation of the character?
I do. I'm sort of torn. I mean, I do understand for a lot of reasons why they can't really keep the costume. A lot of this stuff would have to change over time, but they could have at least got one more series out of it, I feel. And like everyone has acknowledged, the creative team is sort of to really figure it out by issue 4.
Yeah.
And I think if they had been given a second series where the writer, Neil Posner, alludes to, they were going to include Mira more, Aqualad, more of the trappings of the Aquaman universe. I think that could have been really interesting. Some sort of backstory to this is Posner was a design director at DC at the time, and so he designed the logo for this series, which I love. It's a new Aquaman logo used only here and on this special from 1988. He designed the costume himself, and they handed the costume design to Craig Hamilton for the book. And I learned this a few years ago, which I thought was interesting, Christian, because I know you're an Alan Davis fan. Alan Davis was the first artist offered the book. So Dick Giordano was over in England. They were actively recruiting British talent at the time because of Alan Moore and
that makes sense.
Whatnot. Yeah. And he asked Alan Davis, "Hey, would you be interested in this Aquaman series?" And you can find it out there. I may have it. There's one image of Alan Davis doing a sample drawing of this costume. For the book, and it just didn't happen. I think he ended up getting Batman: The Outsiders instead. Was the reason, but.
Well, it's interesting that Alan Davis comes up because literally yesterday on a Twitter account that I follow, I came across, it was a great image that it was an advertisement for the Fall of the Mutants miniseries. And I was just looking at this Alan Davis artwork and I was just like, man, that guy doesn't get enough credit, just because it's like, it's such a cool look. And it also made me think about like, man, who would have thought that at this moment in like 1987 that I would look back and think, yeah, those were really simpler times, that it's like a heap of mutants, just sort of sprawled out there. And yeah, I'm a big Alan Davis fan. Really got to see his work on Excalibur is a big reason why. But he'd done some X-Men annuals and fill-ins definitely along the way. One of the things that I wanted, and if Eric, you have any specific images you want to make sure I get to, let me know. But I wanted this one because I'm just like, is this just because you thought that Arthur's father looked like a young Gregory Peck? I wasn't quite sure what it was about this one that spoke to you.
It was interesting. The family images look like they're from like totally different centuries. Like there's him, somewhere between Gregory Peck and Fabio. Although I love that sweater, by the way.
Yeah,
I wish I had it. Yeah,
yeah, I wish I had a neck that would support that. But then you get over to like the stepmom, and this is where to me the story really clicks too.
You mean the stepmom who's clearly Baby Newworth, who played Lilith on Cheers?
Yeah, circa, I don't know, 1800s New York, late 1800s New York. Like a little confused by some of the design of the past, and I start to wonder how old is Aquaman. But the ideas here that even like his dad never could really love his other son. That was really powerful. And I have two sons, and but I grew up an only child, so for me, I still play catch up with this idea of what siblings means, and so I thought like that's the stuff where, again, sort of saying where the story for me really sort of clicks, is a lot of the stories of the past, a lot of the source of ocean masters like pain and sorrow, and then but also his rage comes from that in ways that I again found that so much more interesting than even Patrick Wilson. That's the actor.
I think he
right?
Did a great job. Yeah,
Patrick he's a very good actor. I've enjoyed him in lots of different types of stories, but he just doesn't have as much to play. A little more arch villain type in those movies, although I think their chemistry in the second one was good. But that's the idea too, that Arthur's dad is part of the issue. It's like he just could never love the brother as much because it wasn't the mom. And I found that really effective.
There's so much of that, obviously, in literature and storytelling in general.
Of course, Cain and Abel.
But just in comic books, because it's easy to forget that Charles Xavier's half brother is Cain Marko the Juggernaut. And which one of those kids are you going to love? Also, Patrick Wilson could never pull off an appearance like this the way that TV bad boy Richard Grieco, I think, would have been able to pull off this look for leather jacket ne'er-do-well Orm, and
up yours, copper.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, Orm Barbarino is what we're going for here. I agree. And I was really glad you had pulled this image when I saw your email, because it was one of the ones that I thought about when I first saw it, but in any case, I think that the fact that you have to really seek this out makes it a little bit more of a gem. It's like a hidden gem. It's like a movie that somebody recommends, in the old days where you had to rent this tape from the video store. I swear you're going to like it. And this isn't like, yes, Eric was able to watch it digitally. So or read it digitally. So it's a little bit easier, but it's not as easy to come by as other stories. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do Batman Year One. That was very easy for me to get a collection of Batman Year One. So, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this story. And what becomes of the creative team, Jeff? I mean, do they do a lot more other stuff, in future years? Really? Did they work for DC for a while, sort of talking about Ponzer and Hamilton?
Yeah, so Hamilton, the penciler, goes on to do... His style changes a lot. He becomes much more of a traditional illustrator. So he does pin-ups. And so I think he did a really good issue of the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s Starman series for DC. Okay. And he did some work on Fables. So he's still kicking around out there and still works. And Neil Posner, I think, left DC, comes back. He worked for them behind the scenes, and he was their new talent coordinator, basically their submissions editor. I think Ivy had a couple rejection letters from him over the years.
Nice.
And so he discovered a lot of good talent for DC. Phil Jimenez is an artist that he discovered. Travis Charest, who's did some stuff for DC and Image, and but yeah, as far as I know, this is the only thing he ever wrote.
Oh,
So
interesting.
It's his only writing gig.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
whether they redo the continuity or not, you'd feel like he would certainly get more of a shot, or perhaps they only focused on some of the more easily discarded lines that Eric highlighted, such as "you should listen to the lady jerkface," was one of those moments. But
I have to say, there's a line in issue 4 that even 12-year-old me groaned at, because even at the time I listened to the oldie station, and there's a line where Orm, Ocean Master, is rising an ancient city up out of the water.
Oh.
And he says, "This is the dawning of the age of Orm Marius."
Yeah, you know what? That's shame on us, Eric, that neither of us grabbed that.
The cringe from that.
I read that when I saw it, and I was just more, I was enjoying it, but I wanted to make sure I finished, so I didn't even get to dwell in that.
And what's so sad about it is it happens on the same page where Aquaman's having like a breakthrough, where he's like got tears coming out of his eyes. He says, "Help! I need your help." And then the next panel is that, or 3 panels later is that. It's like, oh, come on now, you just killed the vibe totally.
You definitely
not
killed
vibe the Justice League member.
No,
vibe is a concept.
no. Barry Conway killed the vibe, but I think that's not what you're talking about.
Actually, I think James DeMatteis killed him, to be honest.
All right, remind me.
Oh, bring him back. I want him here.
I mean, I want to talk to him again, but I'm gonna.
Jerry got fired from Justice League, and James DeMatteis finished the issues.
So. Oh, is that it?
So here it is. This is what we're talking about. I can't actually see it and hold it up, so just make sure that you guys can see it. Although I'm in the little box, right?
Yeah,
I should be in the big box. Yeah. So give me a moment.
That should be our thumbnail for this YouTube video. That one? This is the dawning of the age of
so bad.
Yes.
And if you look at the panels
that
above,
was really bad, by the way. The age of Orm Marius. Yeah.
Just had this really powerfully emotional moment with Aquaman, and you ruin. I don't know. Like, you think at some point that I can see you as a writer. You think that line, you think it's clever, and then you immediately say, "Yeah, but I can't print this."
No, exactly. That's to make your letterer laugh, and they're like, "Okay, but yeah, seriously, what's the real line?"
You're right. So,
I did have a lot of fun going through this. I found it to be a very enjoyable series, and it's sort of this conversation with you, Jeff. It's why I always try to defer to you when we're dealing with DC stuff, because of how unfamiliar I am, and you do have a lot of that background information that I just do not. So it's great to be able to put it in the context, and the fact that I was talking about the dialogue being discarded. The fact that this story is really discarded fairly quickly is it's unfortunate, but it kind of adds to the allure of it. It's almost like, oh, I'm seeing this thing that is a bit of an aberration of the era. So you have any final thoughts on the book before we tell people what's coming next month, Eric?
I never would have found this, and it sounds like you would not have either, Christian. So Jeff,
no, I literally only know about it because of Jeff, and
yeah.
Jeff convinced our mutual friend Will Sterling to buy these issues, and Will did enjoy this story as well. I was not able to join us. I would have had him on with us if he could have. But anyway, finish your thoughts. Sorry, Eric.
No, I was just saying. I actually want to say thank you, Jeff, because this is definitely a title that would have been on the dustbin of my history, but instead, like it. The character work with him and his brother, it also then, unfortunately, the downside of it is because it's so interesting.
Yeah,
I wish the movies went where this went, because there's a lot of you know, inherently, I mean, I think the reason, Christian and I were both around the same age and
Yeah.
always took to titles like the X-Men because you could sort of always found a way to relate. Same with Spider-Man. It's why those were always the most popular Marvel titles. Uh, and I found like the stuff with the brother and the father, that was really powerful. And again, it's Shakespearean, it's biblical, it's the roots of hero's journey are all over that.
Yes.
And I found like amidst some of the 80s trappings of it, amidst some questionable insults and dialogue, I found like those moments were the ones that were really effective. And it, so thank you for bringing this to our attention. And it's also the fun of this book club, to be honest, is seeing all these stories that either I had heard about, never read, or only knew a piece of, and actually being able to sit down with it and really exploring it like we would any sort of other form of writing, like a novel or a regular book club. So I think this was a really great addition to our now growing overall of material that we've covered. And I never took French.
No. And
Over.
yeah, I mean, as fun as it is when we do episodes like God Loves, Man Kills, where Claremont joined us, or Craven's Last Hunt and Jane DeMatteis was with us. I mean, it's great, but I have read those before. And the fun there is kind of going back and rereading it, but it's like discovering something for the first time.
Yeah.
It's always very interesting. And in that vein, what I really wanted to do next month was to find a Madam Web story that did the character justice and could help us forget about the.
What do you mean? What did it justice? It's on video. It's on demand right now.
It was on demand. Like,
you can only be perfect
ago.
Once. Yeah, no, it's already there.
However, I did refer to I was telling these guys before we started, I'm on a group text with a number of the best and brightest of Geekscape, including our pal Jonathan London and Ian Crooner, and a few other people who I don't know if they want to snuggle on it. I don't know. Anyway, they all were like, there are no good Madam Web stories. And I was like, all right. And then we're all starting to talk about Spider-Verse stuff, which I'm like, yeah, I want to do a Spider-Verse closer to Spider-Verse 2. So what I decided that I would be interested in is a character I have, read fairly little of, which is the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. Now, this is not a 70s series. This is called Spider-Woman Origin. And this is sort of when they retconned the Jessica Drew character to have been an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and sort of a little bit of a different take. She loses her powers at one point, and this is sort of, I don't know, I guess it's kind of bringing her back to prominence. And so I thought that this would be an interesting one to do. So Spider-Woman Origins, and we talked about the date, and then I didn't write it down. I believe we will do that on Thursday, April 25th. At 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So that is what you'll be able to see from the Geekscape Book Club in April. On a previous show on Marvel Movie Talk earlier this week, I mentioned that we were going to be doing our special with Joseph Culp, who played Dr. Doom in the Roger Corman 1994 Fantastic Four, which I contend is still the best Fantastic Four live action vehicle on the screen. We'll talk about that with Mr. Culp. And he was unavailable to do it tomorrow. We are going to try to set it up for next week. I'm not sure what day. We're going to do our X-Men 97 recap, but you'll get 2 episodes of Marvel Movie Talk next week. Just follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and all those places, Threads at Christian DMZ. And I will do my best to let everybody know. I'm very excited, but Mr. Culp is actually going to be in Los Angeles next week. If we had done it this week, he was going to be in France. So I feel like it'll be a little bit easier. I assume he was hanging out with Beldar Conehead. That's why he was in France. It's just sometimes I say things just because I want to say them out loud. And of course, as I said, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Christian DMZ. Jeff Winstead, it is always a delight to have you on one of these shows. Please hold up the book again and tell people where they can find you. Look at that.
It for me. My hands are free.
He's got the last Battle of the Revolution. I've got my hard copy, which I moved to my office, and that's a mistake. It just shows that I hadn't done a show with you in a while, that I don't have it here. And Cami Egan enjoyed my Coneheads reference. They were assuming mass quantities. Someday I'd like to really do a deep dive on who thought that 90s Coneheads movie was a good idea, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. Eric Connor, where can people find you?
Well, when I'm not reading The Last Battle of the Revolution, you can slide into my DMs, Count Eric Connor, or better yet, don't, and just tag me, just follow me. Yeah. You leave my DMs alone. Actually, it's probably for the best.
Well, yes, and you'll see Eric and myself on Marvel Movie Talk talking about X-Men 97 throughout all 10 episodes of that, talking to Joseph Culp, and we've got some other fun things coming up in the next few months, and as soon as I can tell you about them, I will. But don't forget to join us next month, where we talk about Spider-Woman Origin. And I believe it's just called Origin. It's not like X-Men Origins Wolverine, which we should do an episode on that as well. But that's not for now. We don't have any more time left for now. So we will see you next month on the Geekscape Book Club. As long as they keep writing them, we'll keep reading them. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.